equipping U.S. forces, weapons and gear modernization, armor, survivability. I worked a lot with the special operations community on equipment. And it was because of all the years that I did that, I wound up doing that at a very high level as an executive for a major defense firm for a number of years. But because of that, in February 2022, actually a few weeks later, in March 2022, after Russia invaded Ukraine, I got a phone call from some friends that were retired out of the Army Special Forces community who said, hey, the government isn't moving fast. A bunch of us are getting together and we're putting together a team of volunteers to go to Ukraine and advise the Ukrainian government on helping them raise their army. And the Ukrainians want a weapons and gear guy really badly who can teach them requirements and procurement from the American system and from an American perspective. Any chance you want to come to Ukraine with us? I said, when are you leaving? I said, Saturday. I said, okay. Anything else I should know? They said, yeah, no pay, no benefits, no backing, no insurance. But this NGO will pay your airfare. So I went and talked to my wife, and she said, yeah, you got to do this. And I went and started packing up my body armor, tactical equipment, medical gear, chemical warfare gear, etc. Did some crash training courses with some friends from various parts of the government for a few days, and went to Poland to join the team. And about 6 of us went into Ukraine together in about the fourth, fifth week of the invasion. And I wound up going to Ukrainian Safe House to embed in the Ministry of Strategic Industries of Ukraine, where almost immediately I fell deeply in love with the people, the purpose, the mission, and eventually the vodka and wine. On my first night in the safe house, the deputy director of the unit I was embedded in, if you can imagine this, it's a lot like what you'd imagine in a movie, right? A bunch of guys gathered around a kitchen table in the safe house. The difference was it was not some rundown ramshackle house. It was a really nice little villa out in the middle of nowhere. But other than that, it was about the same, guns and body armor and medical equipment all over the table and everything. And the deputy director of the unit, Vitaly, pulls out a bottle of Ukrainian vodka. And he slams it down on the table and he says, now we do cultural exchange. And I was like, okay. Is that vodka? I'm not really a vodka guy. He said, no, this is not vodka. This is for you. And I said, okay, what's the difference? Vodka is Russian. It can only make you angry. Horilka is Ukrainian, and it opens your mind. And I said, bad vodka memories from college. I'm really not a vodka guy. It's okay. It was not optional. And I had it, and I went, whoa, what is that? He said, I tell you, this is Horilka. It was the smoothest liquor I've ever had in my life. I could not believe it. And so that was my beginning introduction to Ukrainian wine and spirits. Over the next weeks, I lived in the safe house. The only bribes I actually ever paid in Ukraine were to buy wine and spirits because they were illegal to sell in the first months of the war. The whole industry was shut down nationwide. I couldn't believe how good it all was. It absolutely blew my mind. So, the mission was supposed to be like a week. At the end of the week, the team was like, all right, mission accomplished. We've had the meetings and done the training we were supposed to do. Time to head back. And I was like, I think I'm staying. And I wound up hanging out and living about 5 weeks there. And when I eventually came home, I came home with a suitcase full of wine and vodka. And I was thrilled, right? But I get back to the U.S. I kept volunteering for Ukraine for about 5 months. At which point my wife told me that I had to get a job. with income, something about small children. The whole time I was running around the U.S. to all my local wine stores asking for Ukrainian wine and couldn't get it anywhere. Everybody said, man, I don't even know of a distributor that has Ukrainian wine. So I got a new job in the defense industry that would let me refocus my whole life on the war effort and go back and work in Ukraine. So as a result of not being able to find it in the U.S., I did what any respectable American combat veteran would do. I started bootlegging and carrying home suitcase after suitcase on my trips to Ukraine of this outrageous wine and spirits as I learned about their wine and spirits production. By the end of 2022, I was getting tired of that, A. B, starting to realize that this was a real opportunity. And C, had been caught by the Polish border guards several times and had to get screamed at in Polish and talk my way out in English. You can't. I would declare this stuff in the U.S. to customs, but you can't bring more than a liter of alcohol into the EU. You can't just declare it and pay the customs on it. You're just not allowed to do it. So I didn't have a whole lot of choice. And you can't fly out of Ukraine. Well, I mean, you could try. It would end abruptly. But so I decided to start a company. I reached out to a couple of friends, one who was a volunteer at the Safe House with me, a Ukrainian veteran named Maxim, and David, a former Marine Corps officer who I worked with in the defense industry. I got them together in January 2023, and I said, hey, we need to start a company to bring the best of Ukraine to the United States and give people something to mentally index off of. That's not the war. And show the beauty and craftsmanship and traditions of Ukraine to the American public in a different way. And I want to use it to raise funds and fund operations in Ukraine to save lives on the front line. So I went and found a group called Invictus Global Response, which is all American explosive ordnance disposal veterans and combat engineers who go as volunteers to frontline Ukrainian towns and dig up and disarm Russian landmines in the liberated areas. So 15% of all of our profits from both the wines and the vodkas, everything, goes to funding their landmine removal operations. Monty, their director, actually lost his right foot on an anti-personnel mine in Ukraine demining in 2023. He's there on his second long trip back now on his prosthetic. He says he just steps with that foot first and keeps a spare in his bag. Takes a special time. So that's the genesis of SPYRT Worldwide and how this happened. So let's start with the first sparkling wine here, and then we'll get into the PowerPoint and the whole explanation of the vineyard. So this is a sparkling. So to give you the basic idea, SHABO is one of the wineries that I encountered and learned about as we moved into this process. It's a 3,300 acre vineyard. It's in southern Ukraine near Odessa. It's over 200 years old, continuously producing since 1822. This is a sparkling. They make both Charmat and Champenois. This is a Charmat made from a grape called Teltikuk that only exists in Ukraine, and the only original rootstock left of in the world is at this winery. So let me give you a little intro to SHABO. I'm hoping the audio will work on this as well. But Teltikuk, we're going to get way more into it in a little bit. We're actually going to have three things more of Teltikuk. Oh, you know what? We had some IT trouble converted in setting this up. No. We can't play the video because we have to convert it to a PDF to get it onto this. This is at the SHABO Wine Culture Center and Heritage Center, which is on one of their three campuses that make up over 50 acres on the property. give you a tiny little bit of history on the winery. So wine has been made in Ukraine for over 2,500 years. It started with the ancient Greeks, and in that area in southern Ukraine, near what modern-day Moldova, was called Tiras Akar. In the sixth, or in the the 6th to 2nd century BC. In the more modern era, the Ottomans, the Turks, in the 16th century occupied that area. And specifically, that's when winemaking started in this exact spot, right around on these little peninsulas. And it was called Asa-Abad in Turkish, which meant the lower gardens, because it's at sea level. It descends from the higher elevation down to sea level, and there's an enormous amount of groundwater nutrients, both from the Black Sea and the Dniester estuary. Now, SHABO itself, the winery, was founded by Swiss colonists in 1822. There was an expedition to explore the Black Sea region for winemaking by a bunch of Swiss winemakers, 1821 and 1822. And they traveled as a small group in search of good winemaking terroirs. They found the area that is modern-day SHABO, again, at the time, Asa-Abad, which was difficult for the Francophiles to say. And they reported back, and we still have these reports, on their journey and what they found. They said, they sent letters back saying, we have found heaven on earth for winemaking. So they went back to Switzerland. They gathered more people. They gathered all their families, and about 80 families in total traveled 3.5 months by horse and carriage to modern-day SHABO. Again, Asa-Abad became Shabad, became SHABO. And they founded the colony of SHABO, which was, as far as we know, the only ever autonomous Swiss winemaking colony. They had their own schools, they had their own churches, they had their own police, they had their own entire colony, and the whole place was just dedicated to winemaking. That was its output. They actually won their first, in only 25 years, which as we know is not long for a winery, they won their first international winemaking awards in 1847 in France. So, I'm sorry, I skipped a slide, but things didn't always last so well, right? After about 100 years, the Soviets took the Odessa region, and they ran it into the ground, frankly. Between 1940 and 1991, this is what the facility had turned into. The terroir was still perfect. There was all the opportunity, but the winery itself had been entirely focused on the Soviet standards of quantity, quantity, quantity. Zero care about quality. The scary thing is this was still producing wine. Okay. So in 2003, Georgi Ukridze and Vaja Ukridze, a family that had immigrated to Ukraine from Georgia many decades earlier, when the winery came up to be privatized from the old Soviet state-owned structures, bought the facility for the, it sounds low to us, but at the time it was astronomically high price there, $50,000. They mortgaged everything, they sold what they could sell to be able to afford buying the winery. And they bought it and proceeded to start restoring everything they could, both making brandy and wine. And the vision of the family was to make Ukraine, they said, Ukraine has everything for winemaking. Everything you could possibly want. There's no reason Ukraine isn't known as one of the great winemaking countries in the world. So, again, Soviet times, modern times. Everything is buy once, cry once. Everything is excellence in all they do. SHABO is the largest producer of brandy in Ukraine, which is a brandy drinking country. So the tack was to use the brandy making and sell brandy and use that to make money and reinvest into the winemaking. Between 2009 and 2009 and about 2021, the family's put about $115 million into the winemaking facility. And with how far money goes in Ukraine, that's like putting $400 million into something in the U.S. Everything is detail-oriented. You could eat off of the floor of any broom closet in the facility. The core principles of the facility are viticulture, winemaking culture, and wine consumption culture, and sort of understanding how wine fits into society, not just as something to drink, but as something that makes people happy. 1,200 hectares of vineyards. Let's talk a little bit about this. So the grape Celtic Kurok. Real quick, let me go to a map. So you can see here's where SHABO is. This is where Odessa is, just north of here. It's about the same. It's on the same latitude as Burgundy, but it's warmer because it's at sea level, and it gets about 300 days of sun a year, while being sandwiched between the Black Sea and the Dniester estuary. So this is Celtic Kurok grapes that make this Chardonnay. This is grown in the sand on the banks of the Black Sea. You're going to try 3 different Celtic Kurok based wines today. This sparkling, and then 2 still ones. You'll notice the acidity, the minerality of this, a little bit of maritime influence. It's going to be a little more obvious on that, the still wines. But this is actually the first sparkling ever to be made from Celtic Kurok grapes. So, folks familiar with phylloxera here? Yeah, phylloxera. Sorry. See?
Sorry.
So phylloxera, this is a pre-phylloxera grape because the phylloxera couldn't dig into the sand and get to the roots. They don't like the sand. So this is from that sandy soil. It exclusively grows in the sand on the Black Sea shore in SHABO. So they have vines that are still producing. They go back to 1972. Any questions about anything so far? I want to stop for questions. I'm sure people.
How do you spell? Is it
You spell T-I?
Number 2.
Yeah. This sparkling. That's the still. The sparkling is called Primo Secco because it's a prosecco style made from Celtic Kurok.
So you said it's right there on the shore of the Black Sea. Are there cooling breezes from the Black
Yes.
Sea that grow in that kind of preserve the acidity in the grapes? And
Absolutely. Yeah.
Keep it nice. I mean, that's really interesting about the sandy soil.
Yeah.
The Black Sea, was that like wiped out Spain, France, and
Yep. I mean, wiped out 99% of everything we
Right.
own.
Yeah.
You know, but Celtic Kurok was pretty much totally untouched as a
That was
result.
so interesting.
Because it's one of the only wine grapes that grows in sand.
Yeah. Wow.
And the only place with Celtic Kurok in its original genetic form, not spliced, not grafted, is SHABO. So SHABO has the only original rootstock of this grape left in the world.
And that's from what date? From the 70s?
They're still producing vines from the 70s, but SHABO has been growing Celtic Kurok for over 200 years. So SHABO is the first and only winery to have protected designation of origin in Ukraine, both from Europe and from the Ukrainian government. They have over 4 million vines on site. Yeah. A good chunk of that goes to, yeah, I've actually seen that one. A good chunk of it goes to brandy, and a bunch goes to wine. The wine, or the brandy, the wine is the passion, but the brandy keeps the lights on. SHABO has about a 35% market share of the brandy market in Ukraine. They sell about 1 million bottles of brandy a month. The brandy grapes are machine harvested. All of the wines you're trying tonight are all hand harvested. Still and sparkling are 100% hand harvested. More than 20 different grape varieties. We talked a little bit about Teltikoro, but now you can actually see the grape. So in the original Turkish, where the name comes from, Teltikoro means foxtail. You see how it bushes out and then tapers rapidly, just like the tail of a red fox. So that's where the name of the wine comes from. So one of SHABO's big beliefs is that wine is born in the vineyard. Anybody familiar with Stéphane Darencourt from France? Yeah. Yep. He's been a consultant with SHABO on their viticulture for over 15 years. He's been working with them since before 2010. This is Georgi, the owner of SHABO. And he always likes to recount the story that when he first brought Stéphane in 2010 to SHABO, and they were driving into the facility, they stopped. Wait a minute. Yes, that's it. Stéphane said, wait, what are you doing? Where are you taking me? He said, I'm taking you to the winery. He said, I have nothing to do in the winery. Take me to the vineyard. Said, I don't believe that there's anything I can do for you. And ever since then, Stéphane has been a key consultant in the winemaking. This is Olga, the head winemaker of SHABO. There's actually the team of lead winemakers. It's not by design, it happens to be all women. 7 female winemakers at the winery. The winery has about 1,200 employees on site. So now, let's taste the Teltikoro, the reserve Teltikoro. So this is Teltikoro by itself, totally unadulterated with anything. It's not aged, it doesn't touch oak. This is Teltikoro in stainless steel. And the idea of it is to give you an idea of what this grape is by itself, without trying to soften it, without trying to modify it with oak. There are several levels above this, one of which we'll try tonight. But really, this will give you an idea of terroir, both the grape and the terroir, pretty clearly. Anybody have any questions about the Teltikoro? Mm-hmm.
So is this number 4?
This is number 2. Yeah. Yeah, to be clear, the first one was the Primo Secco, the sparkling. This one is the Teltikoro. Same grapes. Anybody have any guesses or any thoughts on what grapes this compares to? Because this is always fun because everyone has different answers. Yeah, we've had some master somms who say, just I give up. This is totally new to me, different from anything else I've ever tried. That's one thing. It's got a little bit of Chenin Blanc. It's got a little Chardonnay on the end. It's got,
To me, it's a mix of that and white Sangha. So I say a mix of, yeah.
White
I have a
Sangha?
white one at home right now.
I want to see that.
So is it a Saperavi produced in a wet wine style, or the grape mutated and it became a bouquet?
Because the fruit in Saperavi is red, so it's traditionally considered one of the only white wines you can't make white wine from. It's not just the skin. Any thoughts? Any questions? No?
Very good. The nose is so interesting.
It's like Chenin Blanc had a baby with Verdicchio.
Okay, that's a great way to describe it.
Interesting. I've heard that.
mean,
Have they done they figured out
I'm sorry?
Have they figured out?
it's like, that's
I
not.
mean, it goes down to last healthy quota, but longer than the recorded. Any record.
Other great varieties that options for this.
Could it be? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there are some grapes that I think they know of that are partially derived from.
Yes, but that's what it's reminding me of, the Greek wines.
So this superpower,
That's
the going joke is that the superpower of Celtic Kuruk is food pairing. And that it pairs with almost anything. And it's much, much, much easier to make a list of what it won't pair well with than what it will.
Okay, we're saying it reminds us of red sea.
Interesting.
The red
Okay.
sea, a little bit of a tar.
I have that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Yeah, fine. Well, we may us here for but that was a different grade than I had.
So,
The
whole, isn't it? It's crazy, isn't it?
This is awesome.
So all of the heat on this is another thing that makes SHABO different from everybody else. 100% of the heat throughout the entire facility comes from this boiler house, this boiler, which was designed by engineers hired by SHABO. It's one of one in the world, about to be one of two, because they're getting a second one. And the entire boiler house is run off vine clippings from that 3,300 acres, 4 million bucks, which makes them energy independent for heating. And they're working to convert in their power plant more and more of that into power for the entire
The whole
facility.
country.
Well, it's not quite enough grapes for that, but
We need to work on that.
SHABO produces a really wide range of wines, from around $15-ish a bottle range, all the way up to about $600 a bottle. They have different parts of the facility dedicated to each of these efforts, right? This, for example, is the fine red wine facility, where Grand Reserve and above are fermented. We'll get into that in a little bit. Remember these 5,000-liter Terransad oak vats from France. That room alone, they put over $5 million in equipment. So these are, you're going to try one of these. I think our last wine was made, for tonight, is made in one of these facilities, or in this facility. From the Grand Reserve and up level of SHABO wines, everything is fermented in oak. Not only aged in oak, but fermented in temperature-controlled oak vats. These things are enormous. I mean, numerous people can stand inside each one. And all of the grape crushing in them is done by bâtonnage. Any questions about fermentation? Crushing with by hand with big bowls. Yeah.
Okay.
Red and white.
No, so that one's for red. White is fermented in oak as well.
No, I
But
mean the crushing.
yes, but the white is fermented in much smaller tanks. Anybody familiar with Quevery winemaking from Georgia? We don't have one of these tonight because we literally sold out at every single one of these that we have in the U.S. We have new containers being unloaded as we speak in New Jersey. But they make wines in these about 10-foot tall clay vats where wine is fermented, stems and all, in the base of these vats, which are buried to their neck in the ground to control temperature and humidity throughout the year. And it's fermented and aged in the clay, which allows for some oxidation and gives the wine a really unique texture and flavor. So if you're not familiar with Georgian wines, this is a... Right. They have, SHABO has a riccatatelli. Really incredible Georgian style wines made with